Sacred Ground program was originally developed through the Episcopal Church, and so we decided to partake in a 10-week sessions that lasted throughout our program year. And so we met roughly every other week, and it was really a discussion-based, text-based, and film-based look at race and our racial history in the United States.
It was developed originally by Katrina Brown, who found out, in fact, that her family in Rhode Island had a significant role in the transatlantic slave trade. And she explored that, and I think Sacred Ground was almost a catharsis for her, an opportunity to say, how do I fix this? And so that's the origin of Sacred Ground. There are a number of parishes in the Massachusetts Episcopal Diocese that have started with that program. Caitlin and I did something a little different. We modified the curriculum. We did the 10-week series, even with our last session being at the start of COVID and conducted by Zoom, but the rest were in person. And the modifications that we did to the curriculum really had more of a focus on race and really working through the color line historically in this country. And we took a very historical perspective so that we could move chronologically to today, so people could understand what's happening today in historical context. What was surprising to us were how many of the almost 90 participants that we had who had no sense of the history. And over again in our sessions, we heard people saying, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I was never taught that. Why wasn't I taught that? And so I think from that perspective, it was really significant. And I hope a lot of the participants then go back and look more deeply at some of these historical realities, I think, that for us served as the basis for journeying through a sacred ground, looking at race and racism.
We didn't know how many parishioners and some community members were going to express interest, so it really went above and beyond our expectations. So all of these folks had really, some of them, been exposed to our history for the first time. So a lot of these lessons and these histories were not taught in school. So it really kind of provided a wonderful base for the recent race relation issues in this country. So our parishioners are telling us that they felt really prepared, to at least start to understand some of the dynamics right now in this country. So what we're going to do with it is kind of up in the air, largely because of the pandemic. So we're not meeting in person yet. So we're still worshiping every Sunday online. So a lot of our programming is kind of through Zoom. So we're working on what kind of Sacred Ground 2.0 might look like. We're also coming out of Sacred Ground, we formed a race task force on the church, which I'm also a part of. So we're really actively exploring what might the next steps be, both here at St. John's, but also how can we involve the larger Hingham and surrounding community in our work.
For our last session, we were able to incorporate George Floyd. And it was very, very interesting because I think if I take what many of the participants said, this was a Zoom session. And we really meant this as a way to help people process what was happening and what had happened. And they, almost to the person, said, had we not gone through the last 8 weeks of Sacred Ground, we wouldn't have been able to look at this the way we're looking at it now. And so that was really a start for us. And I see Sacred Ground, I'm a professor or a retired professor, and I see Sacred Ground as race and racism 101. And I think one of the things that came out of it, particularly around all of the things that have happened now, is a lot of those participants saying, no, I want to know more. I want to go deeper with this. And so Caitlin and I have, already talked about, Sacred Ground 202. And in that, you really begin to look at, where am I with this? What does it really mean to be anti-racist? Not just in thoughts and in judgments, but in action. And how do I make a difference in this? And not just by reading, but what are the kinds of action things that I can do to make a difference? And what does it really mean to be a white ally? And how do I really grapple with not just white privilege, but the impact that my privilege has on people without privilege, based on color, based on this convergence of color and socioeconomic status. Everyone has seen what's happened, and all the participants that we had for those 10 weeks have seen what's happened. So how do we take them to the next step of processing? Beyond anger, beyond guilt, beyond frustration, to hope and action. And that's really what Sacred Ground is all about.
I feel so blessed to be a part of this community, to be surrounded by so many people of different ages, different walks of life, who really have a hunger and a thirst to learn. That to me is a beautiful thing. And the willingness for these parishioners and our Sacred Ground members to come and expose their vulnerabilities and to really say, you know what, this is what I've been taught about race in America. How can I start to really think about my own positionality? What damage has that caused me, but also what damage has it caused others? And how can I start to address that? That's a really vulnerable place to be, and that's where the growth happens. And so to get almost 90 parishioners to come and commit themselves to a year-long program was, humbling and provides such a sense of hope.
If you go to our website, you should be able to at least find what we did for Sacred Ground. And if you go to the website for the Episcopal Church of America, you will see also the origins of Sacred Ground. We started this saying, maybe we'll get, if we get 10 to 15 people, because everyone's busy, that will be fine. We wound up with almost 90 people signing up, and the greater majority of them staying through the whole series, which both surprised us and encouraged us. I think people are, particularly after this 4 months, really beginning to recognize the impact of race and racism on the society and how we're interrelated. So what happens in Roxbury, what happens in Southside Chicago to Black and brown individuals touches me, because of how this society has really grown as a result and on the backs of Black and brown people in this country. And I think there's a recognition of racial injustice that comes out of these last several months that makes Sacred Ground, or whatever version of exploration, raising awareness, getting educated, looking internally at who I am and where my thoughts come from around this topic, and most importantly, what do I do to make a difference? What do I do to change? You can never change history, but you can change the future. And I think at the end of the day, that's what's most significant about sacred ground, is that in walking this journey, I can begin to see how I can make a change in the lives of not only Black and brown people in this country, but everyone in this country. Because race and racism affects all of us, no matter which side of the color line we're on.